Caitlin Clark is already cashing endorsement checks that dwarf her rookie WNBA salary. But even a star like her may not be enough to hold the league together. Behind the scenes, a 500% salary increase proposal from league owners has triggered a shocking backlash. Instead of celebrating the chance to become the highest-paid women's athletes in the world, the Players' Union called the offer a slap in the face.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Now, what began as a break to negotiation is spiraling into a full-blown standoff. And with billion-dollar sponsors watching, the threat of a canceled 2026 season isn't just a rumor, it's leverage. The stakes are highest for the players who need the league most. Rookies and bench players don't have multi-million-dollar deals like Clark. They rely on WNBA paychecks to survive. Yet they may be dragged into a battle driven by the ambitions of a few elite names. If the union miscalculates and the owners decide to walk away, the league's foundation could collapse, ending nearly 30 years of growth in one quiet offseason. WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert didn't just tap the brakes. She slammed them. In a moment that felt like the league's version of DEFCON 1, Engelbert reportedly responded to players' latest demands with a blunt "we can't pay that." That phrase alone has sent shockwaves to the world of women's basketball, and now, all eyes are on what could be the beginning of a historic meltdown, or the end of the WNBA as we know it. This entire crisis revolves around negotiations for a new collective bargaining agreement, and what started as a conversation about growth has turned into a full-blown standoff that's putting the league's future at serious risk. The owners came to the table with what many are calling a revolutionary proposal. We're talking about a 500% salary increase. Not 5%, 500. That would bring the max player salary up to $1.2 million and boost the average to around $500,000 per year, easily making the WNBA the highest-paying women's sports league in the world. Sounds like a win, right? A huge moment for equality, a headline-worthy step forward for professional women's sports. But the response from the WNBA Players Association? Not even close to gratitude. They called it a slap in the face. That phrase alone has become symbolic of the deep divide between the players and the league's leadership. Instead of triggering momentum, the offer brought negotiations to a screeching halt. And that's where this gets ugly. Because while the headlines focus on dollar amounts and superstar names, the underlying conflict is about power. Who has it, who wants it, and who can afford to lose. The owners, most of whom have been bleeding money for years, are starting to draw a hard line. They see this proposed raise not just as generous, but as historic. They're not exactly thrilled about offering $500,000 averages in a league that, in many cases, is still operating at a loss. So when that offer gets dismissed as insulting, that's not just rejection. That's gasoline on the fire. For the owners, this is business. They're not here for cultural significance or social impact. They want sustainability, profitability, and ideally, a return on their investment. And if they don't get that, there's a growing belief among some of them that canceling the 2026 season could be a legitimate option. That's not just posturing. That's a shot across the bow. Because the one thing the owners have that the players don't, time and money. They can afford to wait this out. Many of them already have. Meanwhile, the players are split. On the surface, they appear united. But behind the scenes, there's a widening gap between the superstars and everyone else. Top-tier players like Caitlin Clark, who already has lucrative endorsement deals that dwarf her rookie salary, could weather a storm. If the league shuts down, she still has Nike. She still has Gatorade. She still has visibility. But for rookies, for bench players, for those barely making six figures and relying on the league for both income and exposure, a canceled season isn't an inconvenience. It's career-ending. That's the double-edged sword of visibility in women's sports. The league provides a platform. Without it, the pipeline breaks. Endorsements dry up. Sponsorships pull back. Young athletes who are dreaming of going pro, that dream disappears. Because if there's no league, there's no ladder. And here's where things start to spiral. Critics are accusing the WNBPA of pushing an agenda that benefits the elite few while risking the entire ecosystem. Some are pointing fingers at players like Nafisa Collier and Breanna Stewart. both of whom are reportedly exploring alternative leagues or ownership investments. If they got their hands on other ventures, their interest in the WNBA's long-term survival might not be quite as urgent as it is for others. The union's refusal to even engage in negotiations has sparked real concern that they're playing a dangerous game with very little leverage. From a strategic standpoint, it's a mismatch. The owners have the capital, the assets, and the ability to absorb losses. The players don't. Not on this scale. That kind of imbalance means the league isn't just in a negotiation. It's in a stare down. And unless someone blinks soon, 2026 could be the year the lights go out. There's also the issue of the league's internal instability. Behind the scenes, WNBA teams are struggling with franchise valuation problems. Ownership changes are getting blocked. Sales aren't going through. All of that makes it harder for the league to function like a healthy business. Throw in this labor war, and you've got a recipe for collapse. What's at stake isn't just a new pay scale. It's the foundation of a 30-year-old league. And yet, the Players Association seems to be holding firm, dismissing the proposed deal entirely and framing it as disrespectful. But is it? A 500% increase is more than historic. It's unprecedented. Critics are starting to wonder if the union has lost the plot. Are they negotiating for the league's survival, or just for a raise that helps the few at the expense of the many? Here's the harsh truth. If this deal falls apart and the league shuts down, the damage won't just hit the players. It'll hit the entire sport. It would mean lost media deals, canceled sponsorships, evaporated visibility, and a halt to the cultural momentum that's been slowly building over the last decade. It could also mark the end of the league's ability to attract and retain rising talent. Who's going to train for years to join a league that may not exist? 2. The owners know that. But they also know they've been losing money for years, and some of them are ready to cut their losses. The idea of sacrificing one season to avoid locking in what they see as an unsustainable deal, that's starting to look like a smart business move, at least from their perspective. And with the players' union refusing to come back to the table, it's hard not to see this as a strategic collapse in the making. It's a power play, but not the kind that happens on the court. This is about economics, leverage, and survival. And right now, the players don't seem to realize how little leverage they actually have. The league is fragile. The economics are complicated. And the willingness of the owners to let the league go dark in 2026? That's not a threat. It's a very real possibility. If that happens, we're looking at more than just a canceled season. We're looking at a collapse of infrastructure, the end of career paths, and a massive setback for women's sports in the U.S. That's not just a sports story. That's a cultural blow. What makes this even more painful is that it didn't have to be this way. The proposed deal wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The WNBA was on the verge of becoming the highest-paying women's league in the world. That could have been a win for everyone. But now, that moment might be slipping away. Not because the league couldn't afford it, but because the negotiation turned into a standoff nobody was prepared to walk away from. There's a word for this kind of situation: self-sabotage. And that's what this is starting to look like. If the league goes down, it won't be because the sport failed. It'll be because the people responsible for protecting it couldn't agree on what progress actually looked like. So here we are, a league on the edge, a proposed deal sitting on the table, a players' union unwilling to talk, and owners quietly preparing for the nuclear option. What happens next? No one knows. But if this impasse holds, the WNBA as we know it may not survive to see its next era. If you're watching this unfold and thinking this can't really be happening, just remember, when both sides believe they're too important to bend, everything breaks. Let us know where you stand. Do you think the players are making a bold stand or a catastrophic miscalculation? Drop a comment below. Hit that like button if you're stunned by how quickly this escalated. And don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns on the biggest meltdowns in sports and pop culture. This saga isn't over. Not even close. And here's the part no one wants to say out loud. If the WNBA collapses, it won't be because the product isn't good. The talent is there. The interest is growing. The cultural moment is ripe. But none of that matters if the league can't stay alive long enough to benefit from it. What we're watching now is less of a dispute and more of a potential slow-motion implosion. where both sides think they're playing chess, but the board is on fire. It's hard not to see this as a missed opportunity on an epic scale. Let's be real. The idea of the average WNBA salary jumping the $500,000? That would have been unthinkable even 5 years ago. It would have shattered glass ceilings. It would have silenced critics. It would have put women's basketball in a financial tier no other female sports league has ever reached. The message would have been clear. The league is evolving, growing, and ready to compete. But instead, that headline moment was tossed aside. The WNBPA calling it a slap in the face wasn't just a rejection. It was a signal that they weren't even close to being on the same page. And with every day that passes, it's starting to look like this might be less about the deal itself and more about a deeper philosophical rift. One side wants a sustainable future. The other seems to be fighting for an idealized version of what they think they deserve, regardless of the current economic reality. Now, some will argue that the players are finally standing up for themselves, that they've been underpaid for too long, and this is the moment to demand more. Fair enough. But demanding more only works when there's something left to demand from. If you push too hard on a structure that's already unstable, it collapses. And that's the danger here. The WNBA isn't the NBA. The money isn't endless. The runway isn't long. The growth is still fragile. One wrong move, and it all goes up in smoke. That's why this fight feels so surreal. On one hand, you've got owners who are finally offering a massive financial leap forward. On the other, you've got a union framing that leap as insulting. And caught in the middle are dozens of players who aren't superstars. They're not in commercials. They're not getting shoe deals. They're just trying to make a living doing what they love. And now, they're the ones who will suffer the most if this turns into a lockout or a full season cancellation. Because here's the thing no one's saying enough. The WNBA doesn't just represent jobs for elite athletes. It represents visibility, opportunity, a system that tells young girls they have a place in professional sports. Take that away, and the ripple effects are huge. Fewer college scholarships, less investment at the grassroots level, a talent pipeline that dries up before it can reach its prime. The union seems to believe the owners are bluffing, that they won't actually cancel the 2026 season. But based on everything we've seen, that assumption feels risky at best and reckless at worst. These owners have been operating at a loss for years. They've bankrolled a league that, while culturally significant, hasn't yet delivered serious profits. If they see this moment as their last chance to reshape the financial model, they might not hesitate to pull the plug, at least temporarily. And let's not forget, even if the league survives a shutdown, it won't emerge unscathed. Sponsors will leave. Networks will reduce coverage. Fans will check out. The momentum the league's built over the last 5 years could vanish overnight. And for what? A negotiating position that, on paper, already looked like a huge win? It begs the question, who exactly is this fight for? Because from the outside, it looks like the people with the least to lose are leading the charge. Players with global endorsements. Athletes with business ventures. Names big enough to survive a pause in league play. But the majority? They don't have that cushion. They need the league. Not in theory. In practice. Every game. Every check. Every endorsement that only happens because they're seen on national TV wearing that jersey. And that's where the narrative starts to shift. The union says this is about fairness. Critics say it's about ego. Maybe it's both. But if the end result is a destruction of the very platform that gives these players a voice in the first place, what's the point? 2. Let's talk about optics for a second. The WNBA has worked for decades to build legitimacy, not just as a women's league, but as a professional league, a place where the best basketball players in the world can compete and thrive. This labor dispute threatens to undo all of that. A canceled season isn't just a business setback. It's a perception crisis. It tells fans, sponsors, and young athletes that the league isn't stable. And once that image breaks, it's incredibly hard to repair. This isn't a victory lap for anyone, not the owners, not the players, and definitely not the fans. Everyone loses if this collapses, but the ones who lose the most, it's the next generation. The 10-year-old girl watching WNBA games on her iPad thinking, That could be me someday. The college athlete grinding through practice, hoping a draft call will change her life. The visibility that women's sports have been fighting for, that takes years to build and seconds to lose. And don't forget, the timing couldn't be worse. Women's sports are finally starting to get real traction. Attendance is up. Merch is moving. College stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese are turning into household names. The WNBA had a golden opportunity to ride that wave, to cement its place in the mainstream sports conversation. But now, instead of headlines about record contracts or sold-out arenas, we're getting stories about a league teetering on the edge of collapse. This isn't just bad PR. It's potentially catastrophic. Because if the league fails to reach a deal and the 2026 season really is canceled, it's going to take more than a few press releases and rebrands to fix the damage. You don't just bounce back from a full season shutdown. You don't just plug the lights back in and pick up where you left off. The trust is broken. The momentum is gone. And rebuilding all of that is not guaranteed. It also raises serious questions about leadership. Who's protecting the future of this league? Who's thinking beyond the next contract? Because right now, it feels like everyone's fighting over the pie while the kitchen burns down. This isn't just about money. It's about legacy, about preserving the space that's taken 30 years to build, about making sure there's a league for the next generation to inherit. And yet, here we are, deadlocked, the owners waiting, the players refusing to budge, the fans stuck watching the train wreck unfold in real time. What's happening to the WNBA is more than a labor dispute. It's a cautionary tale. A reminder that even good intentions can lead to terrible outcomes when egos take over and communication breaks down. So what now? Well, unless someone reopens that door and starts talking again, the league's future hangs in the balance. The offer is still on the table. The clock is still ticking. But the longer the standoff drags on, the harder it'll be to come back from it. And when all is said and done, this might be remembered not as the moment women's basketball broke through, but the moment it broke apart. The deeper you go into the situation, the more twisted it gets. Because beneath all the headlines and social media posts and press statements, there's a brutal irony hanging over everything. The WNBA is fighting for its future, but the people inside it might be the ones tearing it down. It's hard not to feel the tension crackling under the surface. The players want respect. The owners want a return on investment. Both are valid. Both make sense in isolation. But in the real world, this isn't a fantasy league. You don't get everything you want just because you feel you've earned it. That's what makes this whole thing so painful to watch. Because you get where both sides are coming from. And yet, you can also see the disaster forming in plain sight. Let's take a step back. The players' rejection of the salary offer wasn't just about numbers. It was symbolic, a message, a loud and clear we're not settling. But the thing is, this wasn't settling. It was historic. A salary structure that would have made the WNBA the highest-paying women's sports league in the world. That's not a minor step forward. That's a leap. That's the kind of headline that changes perceptions and attracts new investment. And now it's in the trash bin because it wasn't enough. So now the owners are staring at a table with no one sitting across from them, asking themselves a pretty basic question. Why are we doing this? Why are we sinking money into a product where progress isn't even recognized as progress? Why are we offering millions when the response is public outrage? And more importantly, what happens if we just don't anymore? That's the scenario no one wants to believe, but everyone should be taking seriously. The owners could walk. They've done it before in other leagues. They've pulled the plug on unprofitable ventures. They don't need the WNBA to survive. They've got NBA teams, investment portfolios, businesses that actually make money. This league has been, for many of them, a project, an experiment, a passion. But passion only carries you so far when the bottom line keeps bleeding red. The union? They don't have that kind of cushion. Players need the WNBA way more than the WNBA needs any one player. And yet, the way this standoff is playing out, you'd think it was the opposite. There's also something incredibly fragile about where the league is in this exact moment. For the first time in years, there's genuine buzz. More eyes. More media. More merch flying off shelves. college stars transitioning into pro celebrities. It should be the beginning of a new golden era. But instead of doubling down and capitalizing on it, the league is now flirting with a full shutdown. Because of what? A slap-in-the-face deal that, by all accounts, would completely rewrite the financial status quo of the league. Segment. There's a world where this could have been spun as a landmark moment for women's sports. A deal that proves women athletes can command massive salaries. That shows investment is paying off. That sends a message to young athletes everywhere. We're building something real here. Stick around. Instead, we're watching the beginning of what might be a self-inflicted collapse. Not because the league failed, but because no one could agree on how to succeed. It's the kind of moment that sports historians will look back on and ask, how did it all go so wrong? And the answer? Pride, miscommunication, misaligned priorities, a refusal to meet in the middle, all while the clock ticks toward 2026. And the threat of a season that never tips off becomes more real by the day. If this league goes dark, it won't just be a pause. It'll be a vacuum, one that takes years, if ever, to refill. So now it's your turn. Drop a comment below. Do you think the players overplayed their hand? Or are the owners lowballing in disguise? Hit like if you think the league needs to find a middle ground, fast. And subscribe if you're just as stunned by how quickly all of this spiraled. Because if the WNBA does go under, you'll want to say you saw it coming.